agitation which made the white summer stretching before her seem like an unrolling canvas on which she might draw those first rude, pure strokes that are free. Then, too, and with a straight face, she was laughing because there was so little they suspected. Nothing. The light quivering against the table silver seemed to at once encourage her excitement and to flash a warning signal. Careful, dear. But elsewhere something said, Grady, be proud. You are tall, so fly your pennant high above and in the wind. What could have spoken? The rose? Roses speak. They are the hearts of wisdom, she'd read so somewhere. She looked out the window again. The laughter was flowing up. It was flooding on her lips. What a sparkling, sun-slapped day for Grady McNeil and roses that speak. Why is that so funny, Grady? Apple did not have a pleasant voice. It suggested the sub-vocal prattlings of an ill-natured baby. Mother asks a simple question, and you laugh as though she were an idiot. Grady doesn't think me an idiot, surely not, said Mrs. McNeil, but a tone of weak conviction indicated doubt, and her eyes, webbed by the spidery hat veil she now lowered over her face, were dimly confused with the sting she always felt when confronted by what she considered Grady's contempt. It was all very well that between them there should be only the thinnest contact. There was no real sympathy, she knew that. Still, that Grady, by her remoteness, could suggest herself superior was unendurable. In such moments, Mrs. McNeil's hands twitched. Once, but this had been a great many years ago, and when Grady was still a tomboy with chopped hair and scaly knees, she had not been able to control them, her hands, and on that occasion, which of course was during that period which is the most nervously trying of a woman's life, she had, provoked by Grady's inconsiderate aloofness, slapped her daughter fiercely. Whenever she'd known afterwards similar impulses, she steadied her hands on some solid surface, for at the time of her previous unrestraint, Grady, whose green, estimating eyes were like scraps of sea, had stared her down, had stared through her and turned a searchlight on the spoiled mirror of her vanities. Because she was a limited woman, it was her first experience with a willpower harder than her own. Surely not, she said, twinkling with artificial humor. I'm sorry, said Grady. Did you ask a question? I never seem to hear any more. She intended the last not so much as an apology as a serious confession. Really, twittered Apple, one would think you were in love. There was a knocking at her heart, a sense of danger. The silver shook momentously, and a lemon wheel, half squeezed in Grady's finger, paused still. She glanced swiftly into her sister's eyes to see if anything were there that was more shrewd than stupid. Satisfied, she finished squeezing the lemon into her tea and heard her mother say, It is about the dress, dear. I think I may as well have it made in Paris. Dior or Fat, someone like that. It might even be less expensive in the long run. A soft leaf green would be heaven, especially with your coloring and hair. Though I must say I wish you wouldn't cut it so short. It seems unsuitable and not quite feminine. A pity debutantes can't wear green. Now I think something in white-watered silk. Grady interrupted her with a frown. If this is the party dress, I don't want it. I don't want a party, and I don't intend to go to any, not those kind at any rate. I will not be made a fool. Of all the things that fatigued her, this tried and annoyed Mrs. McNeil most. She trembled as if unnatural vibrations jarred the sane and stable precincts of the plaza dining room. Nor do I mean to be made a fool, she might have said, for in contemplating the promotion of Grady's debut year, she'd done already a great deal of work, maneuvering, There was even some idea of hiring a secretary. Furthermore, and in a self-righteous vein, she could have gone even so far as to say that the whole of her social life, every drab luncheon and tiresome tea, as in this light she would describe them, had been suffered only in order that her daughters receive a dazzling acceptance in the years of their dance. Lucy McNeil's own debut had been a famous and sentimental affair. Her grandmother, a rightfully celebrated New Orleans beauty who had married South Carolina's Senator LaTrotta, presented Lucy and her two sisters en masse at a camellia ball in Charleston in April of 1920. It was a presentation truly, for the three LaTrotta sisters were no more than schoolgirls whose social adventures had been heretofore conducted within the shackles of a church. So hungrily had Lucy whirled that night, her feet for days had worn the bruises of this entrance into living. So hungrily had she kissed the governor's son that her cheeks had flamed a month in remorseful shame, for her sisters, spinsters then and spinsters still, claimed kissing made babies. No, her grandmother said, hearing her teary confession, kissing does not make babies. Neither does it make ladies. Relieved, she continued through to a year of triumph. It was a triumph because she was pleasant to look at, not unbearable to listen to. Vast advantages when you remember that this was the meager season when the Junior Assembly had only such deplorable persimmons to choose among as Hazel Vere Newmland or the Lincoln girls. Then, too, during the winter holidays, her mother's family, they were the Fairmonts from New York, had given in her honor, and in this very hotel, the Plaza, a distinguished dance. Even though she sat now so near the scene and was trying to recall, there was little about it she could remember, except that it was all gold and white, that she'd worn her mother's pearls, and oh, yes, she'd met Lamont McNeil, an unremarkable event. She danced with him once and thought nothing of it. Her mother, however, was more impressed. For Lamont McNeil, while socially unknown and though still in his late 20s, cast over Wall Street an ever-enlarging shadow, and so was considered a catch, if not in the circle of angels, then by those of a but slightly lower stratum. He was asked to dinner. Lucy's father invited him to South Carolina for the duck shoot. "Manly," old Grand Mrs. LaTrotta commented, and as this was her criterion, she gave him the golden seal. 7 months later, Lamont McNeil, pitching his poker voice to its tenderest tremor, spoke his piece. And Lucy, having received only 2 other proposals, one absurd and the second a jest, said, "Oh, Lamont, I'm the happiest girl in the world." She was 19 when she had her first child, Apple, so named amusingly enough because during her pregnancy Lucy McNeil had eaten them by the barrel. But her grandmother, appearing at the christening, thought it a shocking bit of frivolity. Jazz and the 20s, she said, had gone to Lucy's head. But this choice of name was the last gay exclamation point to a protracted childhood. For a year later she lost her second baby. Stillborn, it was a son, and she called him Grady in memory of her brother killed in the war. She brooded a long while. Lamont hired a yacht and they cruised the Mediterranean. At every bright pastel port, from Saint-Tropez to Taormina, she gave on board sad, weeping ice cream parties for gangs of embarrassed native boys the steward shanghaied from ashore. But on their return to America, this tearful mist abruptly lifted. She discovered the Red Cross, Harlem, the 2-demand bid. She took a professional interest in Trinity Church, the Cosmopolitan, the Republican Party. There was nothing she would not sponsor, contribute to, connive for. Some said she was admirable, others said brave. A few despised her. They made a spirited clique, however, these few, and over the years their combined strength had sabotaged a dozen of her ambitions. Lucy had waited. She had waited for Apple. the mother of a top-flight debutante.